Have you heard about Palantir, the Silicon Valley tech company that builds highly secretive, large-scale data analysis platforms that partners with the government for just about everything? Well, everyone's asking a completely justified question right now. Does JD Vance have a Palantir problem? Does JD Vance owe too much of his political success to the co-founder of this company to the point that he is compromised? And the honest answer is, the setup around him is exactly the kind of swampy DC mess that breeds conflicts of interest. If you're sick of politicians blurring the line between public service and private profit, this is absolutely something that you should care about, especially because there is a chance JD Vance becomes the next president of the United States. If you're new here, I'm Lou Hawley, and welcome to the family. So JD Vance didn't just wander into national office. In case you were wondering, that's not at all what happened. He had serious rocket fuel, serious funding behind him. A big piece of that fuel was a man named Peter Thiel, PayPal co-founder, early Facebook investor, co-founder of the company Palantir, and one of the most politically influential tech billionaires of the last 20 years. Absolutely. Thiel put real money behind getting JD Vance elected, behind Vance's rise to political power. And we're not just talking speculation or rumor, we're talking public filings, 8-figure super PAC support in that 2022 Ohio race. That support obviously mattered. It introduced JD to the national stage, helped him beat an incredibly crowded field, and made him a serious player in Washington. So check out this article that helps summarize why this relationship between JD Vance and this company has become such a major point of contention in recent days. So in recent discussion, Vice President JD Vance reached out to Roger Stone, a longtime advisor to former President Donald Trump, to gain insights into pressing national concerns. Stone highlighted a technology company that has come under increasing scrutiny, Palantir. Vance's connection to Palantir's co-founder, Peter Thiel, has long been a focal point for critics, particularly from the Democratic Party. Thiel's financial backing was pivotal in Vance's successful campaign for the Ohio Senate in 2022, providing $15 million that significantly bolstered his political ambitions. However, the controversy surrounding Palantir extends beyond party lines and is now reverberating within Trump's own base. And the administration directs substantial government contracts to Palantir. Reactions from prominent figures have emerged. Figures like Steve Bannon have drawn comparisons between Palantir and dystopian sci-fi antagonists, while comedian Joe Rogan described the company as creepy during an episode of his popular podcast. And we will talk about why Joe Rogan calls Palantir creepy, because honestly, Palantir kind of is a creepy company, but we'll come right back to this. At a recent gathering of young conservatives at the University of Mississippi, Vance took a defensive stance against speculation that he is overly aligned with Palantir. He said Palantir is a private company, acknowledging both its beneficial services and some of its controversial actions. Vance has positioned himself as a connector between the Republican populist faction and the tech industry, a role that shapes his political narrative. Earning support from influential figures like Bannon and Tucker Carlson enabled his campaign, but expectations from Silicon Valley connections persist. Okay, now zoom in on Palantir specifically, because this is where all the worry lives, because of this specific company. What does Palantir actually do? Well, to keep it simple, it's data fusion software. That doesn't actually make it simple at all, does it? Okay. Think of different databases and sensor feeds that don't talk to each other yet, like battlefield video, satellite imagery, logistics, criminal records, immigration files, health files. I mean, you name it, everything. Palantir's products pull all of those streams into one place. It stitches them all together, and it gives analysts and commanders a searchable, clickable map of what's going on so they can act faster. It pulls everything together into one. In the military, that might mean finding a target more quickly and coordinating assets. In domestic arenas, that can mean linking up investigative leads across different agencies, or building dashboards that show who interacts with whom and where. That's powerful. It's also why Palantir's biggest customer has been the government, defense, intelligence, homeland security, immigration, policing, and why the company's revenue has leaned very heavily on government contracts. I believe I read that like 55% of the revenue comes from government contracts. So when Washington leans further into AI data platforms and decision advantage, Palantir's addressable market gets significantly larger. If the national security state grows, if it expands, then Palantir grows. Palantir expands. If big public systems, from the Pentagon to public health, centralize more data, Palantir is in the best position to sell the operating system to them. Okay? So now let's put our detective hats on and connect the dots. You've got a high-ranking elected official, okay, JD Vance, whose rise was bankrolled in large part by the co-founder of a company that depends on federal spending and access for a big chunk of its revenue. So now, is that automatically corrupt? No, it's not. But is it exactly the kind of setup where the public deserves daylight, transparency, disclosures, and recusals, so we're not just trusting words out of the mouths of professional liars, politicians? Yes. Absolutely. Because if the VP is anywhere near decisions that shape procurement policy or budgets in domains where Palantir is a bidder, where Palantir is trying to land that government contract, or where its competitors are, the risk there is not theoretical. That risk of corruption, of someone having a little bit too much pull, it's very real. And to be honest, it's not even hidden. So now let's zoom out for a second, because like I just said, Palantir's government work, their connection and, contracting with the government, it's not some secret. A bunch of it has been announced in press releases. This is all public information. The company has landed marquee defense programs, battle management, army targeting efforts, space contracts, AI-enabled analysis initiatives. If you've heard names like Project Maven or Titan in the last few years, those are programs meant to push the Pentagon deeper into software-first warfare. And of course, the government is contracted with Palantir to develop prototypes for those programs. And multiple administrations have advanced that shift too. It's not just Republicans, it's not just Democrats. So the point of me telling you this is because we need to be aware that we are moving towards a world where Palantir and companies like it are going to become larger, and they're going to become much more important. More missions becoming data problems equals more business for the data platform like Palantir. This all leads to more business opportunity for that company. But this creates another issue that I'll address in just a second. But before we do that, we have to talk about this. When you shift from overseas stuff to what happens here at home, so we've been talking about how Palantir can have an effect abroad, but we haven't talked about the effect it can have here at home. Because this is stuff that is personal to you, personal to your life. And rightfully, when you start thinking about how Palantir can affect you or how they are already affecting you, people get nervous. And they get nervous for a reason. And it comes down to something, incredibly simple and incredibly important to Americans. Our civil liberties, our privacy. Palantir has built tools that agencies like ICE use. They use to track and build cases. Civil liberty groups worry that those tools make it way too easy to scoop up tons of data, link it all together, and run big find everyone connected to X searches. Stuff the public never really signed off on. Just overall incredible surveillance, wow, and connecting all that surveillance together. We've also seen police departments test similar platforms that pull in license plates, arrest records, social media, and more, and pull it all together. That raises red flags about bias, constant surveillance, and predictive policing, and all that basically repeats old injustices just with a shiny new dashboard, shiny new AI user interface. To be clear, the software itself isn't illegal. The problem is what happens once you have a powerful data machine sitting on every single desk. The natural drift becomes, and we've seen this, it's a slippery slope. It just becomes, well, we use it here. Why not use it over here for this too? And that's exactly where you need bright and bold lines, clear rules on what data can be used, strict limits on searches, independent audits, and real penalties if agencies break the rules. Without that, the tech doesn't just solve crimes. It slowly turns into an always on, always watching surveillance. And that is what we're moving towards here in the United States. Now, back to JD Vance and how all of this ties together. His professional network has overlapped with that Palantir, that Silicon Valley world for a while now. As I mentioned in the article that we read, before getting into politics, he co-founded a venture fund with early backing from the same orbit of these tech heavyweights. And he also used a lot of those connections to fund his campaign for Senate and for president. But the issue lies in this. When you move from donor dinners to a seat that can shape federal purchasing and policy, the standard we hold you to should change. And you can't just say, trust me, I'm a completely different person now who owes nothing to these tech billionaires and they don't influence me at all anymore, even though they gave me millions of dollars. Because guess what? I don't trust you. Nobody trusts you. I don't trust any politician. I think most politicians, just like those tech owners, are interested in serving themselves before anything else. So when that self-interest means increased surveillance on Americans and more war and conflict overseas, it's fair to say that I get a bit concerned because the Palantir problem JD Vance has, what it really is and why it is a problem is because it is the collision of incentives. Simply put, that's what it is. A company whose growth depends on deeper government reliance on its software and a political leader who owes a chunk of his ascent, his rise in the political world to the company's co-founder. And, while living in a policy environment where the government is racing to buy more AI, more data platforms, more AI decision tools across defense, immigration, health, and policing. You can see how this can create a giant conflict of interest, which raises concern, and rightfully so. If you don't put hard guardrails in there, you've just reinvented another gross revolving door in software form. And that's another revolving door is the last thing that we need. The last thing we need is more politicians that owe their success to these giant corporations, especially when these giant corporations rely heavily on government contracts. Now, okay, I can already hear the counter argument, and let's be fair to it, okay? There's a good faith case that the US government has been embarrassingly behind on data. Yeah, okay. And that better software can shorten wars. It can reduce collateral damage, and it can help us compete against adversaries who aren't exactly shy about surveillance. If Palantir or any other vendor delivers results that actually save lives and beat our enemies, why wouldn't the government buy it? Okay, yeah, totally valid question. The answer isn't we should never buy it. I don't know why my laptop just started playing a whole bunch of music. Okay, yeah. So like I said, the answer isn't that we should never buy it, that we should completely cut Palantir out. No, the answer is we should buy it under rules that put the public interest ahead of anyone's friends. We need to be sure our government is always acting on behalf of the country's best interest, our best interest, and not a specific company's interest or a donor's interest. Now, there's also a good faith civil liberties case that we should worry about too. We saw how quickly enterprise tools can supercharge domestic enforcement. We've seen how pilot programs in cities morph into permanent systems nobody voted for. We've seen, temporary measures become the new normal. And we've watched government IT turn into vendor capture very quickly, where one platform becomes so embedded that policy follows the product, not the other way around. That's how you wake up in 5 years with a surveillance machine that you never consented to, and absolutely no way to unwind it. And that should be a serious concern of every American that is even slightly concerned about liberty. So what do I actually want from JD Vance here? I want complete transparency and sunlight. I want distance from these companies, and I want enforceable limits to make sure no one is stepping over a line that they shouldn't be stepping over. It's also kind of crazy that Vance came up as a break the mold, break the mold against all the elite, blah, blah, blah kind of guy, right? He had Rust Belt roots, anti-establishment vibes, tell it like it is, stick up to the man energy, but he's just bankrolled by the co-founder of PayPal and Palantir. It seems a bit odd, doesn't it? Here's what's important. The longer you let public power and private profit quietly come together, quietly merge, the more war and surveillance turns into corporate growth strategies instead of last resort tools to defend our country. And once that happens, the incentives tilt enormously. Suddenly there's always another crisis that justifies another platform, another data platform, another data set, another pilot program that never ends and costs a lot of money. You don't actually have to be paranoid to worry about that happening. You just have to have watched the last 20 years of temporary measures that never sunset, and contractors that always somehow find the next necessary mission, necessary reason for conflict, necessary reason for why they're needed. So does JD Vance have a Palantir problem? I'd say yeah, clearly yes. He has a proximity to Palantir problem. He has a credibility problem. Are you going to be making policy decisions based on what you believe is best for our country, or based on what Peter Thiel whispered in your ear after he reminded you that you owe your political success to him? JD Vance is close to a benefactor whose most, I wouldn't say his most successful company, I don't really know if it is, but currently his most sensitive company thrives when Washington pours money into AI-driven security and centralized, merged data. That's just a blatant truth. So now one last thing, because I know how all this gets spun. This isn't about punishing success or pretending we don't live in a dangerous world. It's about making sure that these politicians, keep faith with the people that put them in office, that voted for them, by proving that they serve the country, not a specific contract with a specific company that throws them cash every single time they're running for an election, okay? And it's about remembering that the government doesn't just buy software, okay? The government sets norms the rest of society ends up living under. If we're going to live with more powerful tools all around us in the name of security and efficiency, then the people who make those policy decisions better be doing it for the right reasons. And not reasons based on what their donors are whispering in their ears. But although, to be honest, I don't think these policy decisions are typically made with our well-being in mind. And that's why I believe that JD Vance does have a Palantir problem. That so many of these politicians have problems when they're invested in companies like Lockheed Martin that depend on, government contracts, when they are bankrolled by these companies that require government contracts. There's so much conflict of interest in DC now that it's completely fair to wonder, are these politicians making decisions with our interest at heart or their interest at heart? With their donors' interest at heart. We have created this system where we can never tell whether or not politicians are making decisions on our behalf or on the behalf of a corporation. And yes, that is something we should be concerned about. But honestly, I think we need to move towards tearing down those systems, because those systems have created this incentive structure that it does not create a flourishing country in the long run. It doesn't, and it's that simple. Yeah, we need to tear down this entire system that we've created, where our politicians are more loyal to major donors and to mega corporations than they are to the people that voted them into office, to the people they swore to serve. And that's just what it is.